I'm ranking the best and worst weight loss advice based on real results from my 1,138 clients. And I'll show you exactly which advice to use and which to ignore, even if in a high tier, based on your body fat stage. If you've ever struggled with sticking to things, or felt like you were doing everything right but still couldn't lose weight, this will explain why it's been so hard. Because I'll be honest, I was shocked by what showed up in the data. The worst weight loss advice didn't come from influencers. It came from science. Advice that works great on paper, but breaks down in real life when evaluated on 3 conditions. Effectiveness. Does this actually create fat loss in the real world? Not in a lab or a perfect week, but in everyday chaos. Applicability. Can the average person realistically run this right now with their time, skills, food environment, and support? And sustainability. Does the average person want to keep doing this years later without resentment or burnout? Each gets scored 0 to 3. I add them together, and here's how that maps to the tiers. S tier advice is score 9. Worked long-term for everyone I have coached. A tier, score 8. Worked long-term for most clients, but needed more intention. B tier, 7. Worked long-term for some lifestyle dependent. C tier, 6. Worked long-term for a small specific group. D tier, 1. Sounds smart, didn't move the needle. Big score drop because if it's ineffective, I won't score the other 2. F tier, 0. Not just ineffective, harmful. And just to be clear, if something in a lower tier is working for you and you feel great, keep doing it. I'm ranking based on what worked long-term across my clients. Now, all weight loss advice fits into this simple process. What to do, how to do it, how to stick to it. We're going to start with the juiciest, most popular what to do advice, low carb. Come on down! Keto and Atkins are the most popular low carb diets, and for good reason. Pretty much everyone reports the fastest weight loss they have ever seen. So it ranks high for effectiveness. Score 3. Both Keto and Atkins start very low, typically around 20 grams per day of carbs. To put that into perspective, a single apple has 14 grams of carbs. So low carb requires actively thinking through what to eat, cooking more intentionally, and avoiding the junk and sweets that show up at work, at dinner, or when eating out. So applicability for the average busy person is medium. Score 2. Totally doable, but it takes deliberate effort. Still, given how popular these diets are, effectiveness clearly outweighs applicability. And yet, almost everyone I talked to eventually gave them up. So naturally, I asked, why did you stop low carb? And the reasons fell into 2 buckets. The first is the it stopped working bucket. This bucket has 2 groups. Group 1 says it stopped working, in quotes, because their weight loss continued, but the fast weight loss at the start disappeared. This made them think it wasn't working anymore. The second group kept going despite the slowdown, and eventually their weight loss did stall, bouncing between the same 3 to 5 pounds for a month. To be clear, both these trends happen to everyone on a low-carb diet. But why? When you eat fewer carbs than usual, your body still expects your usual carb dosage for energy. So it makes up for the reduced intake by using your stored carbs, glycogen. This means your weight drop is a mix of glycogen loss, and because each gram of glycogen is stored with 3 to 4 grams of water weight loss. On top of that, because nearly all junk and sweets are carb heavy, by doing low carb, you cut them out and unknowingly put yourself into a calorie deficit, which is what actually causes fat loss. Side note, if you think I'm ranking calorie calculators in the S tier, you're going to be in for a surprise. Okay, back to low carb, where you lose fat, water, and glycogen, while on other diets, you lose mainly fat and very little water and glycogen. So your weight drops fast on a low carb diet, but your fat drops the same as on any other diet. But then as you keep going, you lose the majority of the glycogen and water you can lose. So then the weight drop becomes primarily fat loss. This is why your weight slows down to match the weight loss on any other diet after 2 to 4 weeks. But it feels shocking to you because you're anchored to the early fast results where you thought the good times were never going to stop. And if you keep going, any diet eventually stops working and you hit a plateau. I'll rank later the method to break through plateaus, but for now, know that this is normal on any method. But the early fast expectation that low carb sets ironically shoots itself in the foot. But this isn't the only way low carb shoots itself in the foot. We also have the second bucket. The people in this bucket stopped doing low carb for reasons ranging from I went on vacation to I couldn't ignore my cravings anymore to it was really hard when eating out. And when I'd ask, so why not go back to low carb after that vacation, stressful week, or social? The real answer would come out. It took a lot of effort. I was dreading returning to that restricted life. So whether it be the stopped working or it's too hard bucket, sustainability is low for most people. Most, not all. So who does low carb work for long term? Specifically, we looked at after 3 years. People who experience immediate negative symptoms from higher carb. Things like digestive issues, inflammation, or neuropathy triggered by certain carb-heavy foods. For them, low carb sticks because the feedback is immediate and physical. For the rest of us, the high effort of avoiding all junk and sweets, which makes socials, vacations, and cravings 10 times harder, combined with weight loss slowing down to what's typical on any other diet, starts feeling high effort for average reward. Not worth it. So low carb score is 6 total, which puts it in the C tier, worked long-term for a small specific group. Now, if you're wondering about a diet that's popping in your feed a lot, hormone diets, carnivore, any method that tells you to cut out a macro or food groups, and you're confused as to which one is best for you, listen up. All of them work because of the same reasons as low carb. High effectiveness because none are high carb, meaning they all get you to cut out your favorite junk and sweets, and so indirectly cause you to lose fat. Medium applicability, takes some planning effort, but doable. And low sustainability. Unless society changes to ban junk and sweets, you'll forever suffer from it's too hard or the high effort average rewards reality. And like any rational person, you would be looking for effort and reward to at least be equal or even better. Low effort, high reward. These are coming up. But before we get there, I want to also address TikTok's obsession with one-off magic foods like apple cider vinegar, coffee and lemon, juicing, etc. All of which purportedly turn fat burning on by boosting your metabolism so you shred fat while laying in bed. Yes, these do boost your metabolism. But only by tens of calories. Again, to put things into perspective, you burn hundreds of calories pacing around while on hold, fuming at customer service. So effectiveness low, and therefore it doesn't even matter how applicable or sustainable it is. So total score of 1, it goes into D tier. Nope. I can't do it. You see, the bigger problem is the trap you fall into. Chasing hacks, overusing stimulants, constantly disappointed when shortcuts don't work, and slowly losing trust in yourself. This is one of the top 3 damaging mindsets we have to coach people out of. I'll discuss the other one later. So I'm giving this a total score of 0, which means it goes into F tier, the harmful tier. Now, if you're like me, you jump to the other most popular what to do advice, the one that cuts no foods out, intermittent fasting. You just skip a meal and you can pick which one so you can still get to eat with your family and friends. For most people, this is easy to start. High applicability, score of 3. You start seeing weight loss, and because skipping a meal feels easy, it feels sustainable. But let's not get hasty. If you have looked up anyone who got to their goal on intermittent fasting alone, there's a clear pattern. Skipping 1 meal stops working, so they skip 2. Then alternate days. Then fasting multiple days. Why does this happen? First, skipping 1 meal is easy, but it can quickly slip into overeating in the meals you do eat, and so you lose no weight. Second, the leaner you get, the fewer calories your body expects. If fasting is your only lever, the only way forward is longer fasting. For most of us, that's unsustainable because we like eating with our families and socializing. So intermittent fasting alone scores low on sustainability. But if you can tolerate extreme fasting, you will lose weight. So effectiveness is high. This totals a score of 7, putting it in the B tier. Worked long-term for some, depending on lifestyle enjoyment. At this point, some of you clever cookies are thinking, why not combine intermittent fasting with intuitive eating? Just stop eating when your body tells you to stop. That way, you could avoid both problems of intermittent fasting. But here's where theory breaks in the real world. There are 3 problems. First, your hunger and fullness cues are designed to keep your body at its current size, not to cause fat loss. So at best, most people end up maintaining. Second, people gain weight by overriding these cues for years. Over time, the cues stop firing at the correct time, and people lose the skill of responding to them. Third, think about the last time you knew you weren't hungry, but still kept eating. Stress, boredom, celebration, connection, none of those care what your hunger cues say. Intuitive eating requires strong nutrition knowledge and well-calibrated body cues, both of which are misfiring in someone struggling to lose weight. So its applicability is low, and even if you implement it well, its effectiveness is medium for losing fat due to problem 1. So does this mean a person losing fat can never eat intuitively? Not at all. In fact, that's the final destination of our coaching program because intuitive eating sustainability is the highest. But it's not where most people should start. You build the skills step by step until your cues actually work again. This gives intuitive eating a score of 6, putting it in the C tier. Work long-term for a small, specific group. So if intuitive eating isn't the starting point, what actually works while you're still losing fat? This brings us to the middle ground between rule-based diets and intuition. Counting. Starting from the left of this zone, we have macro ratios, the 40-40-20 pie charts you see all over your feed. These are mostly pushed by fitness influencers, not weight loss coaches. And that makes sense. If you're shaping an already lean body, ratios matter. But for the average person losing fat, this is overkill. Why? Your muscles are buried under layers of fat. You can't meaningfully sculpt what you can't see. So precise shaping doesn't matter yet. At this stage, only 2 things move the needle. Your macro total, also known as your calorie target. And yes, macro counting is really just another way to getting you to hit a calorie target. And protein, but not because of muscle retention. Whoa, what? Yep. When you have a lot of fat to lose, your body is far less likely to burn muscle. Protein's biggest job at this stage is controlling hunger. And for some people, cravings. Carbs and fats, they can fall where they will. So macro ratios score high on effectiveness and applicability. But sustainability is medium because it requires threading the needle through 3 targets when it could be simpler. This gives macro ratios a score of 8, putting it in the A tier. Works for most, but requires more intention. Now, if you're like me, medium sustainability is too low. You're busy. Any extra effort can be the final nail in the coffin of your weight loss. So since we have distilled fat loss down to just calories and protein, the obvious move is why not just use a calculator and get my targets? Easy S tier, right? No. There are 3 big problems with calorie calculators. First, most of them push you into a deficit that's too aggressive. That's when hunger and cravings spike, consistency vanishes, and people end up regaining weight, sometimes even gaining more. Second, calculators are built on bodybuilding assumptions. They overestimate protein. You don't need 1 gram of protein for every pound of body weight. And they overestimate how many calories the average person burns through movement. For example, a calculator estimates a 1900 calorie target for sedentary. But if you select lightly active, it jumps to 2615 calories, meaning it assumes 25% of your burn comes from movement. Across our 1,000 plus clients, we have never seen that play out in real life. Third, and this is a real deal breaker, calculators assume your body is static. Even if the activity estimate was right, it's only true at first. Our bodies get efficient at movement, so calorie burn drops over time. The same happens to your calorie needs. A calculator might be okay on day 1, but we find it often wrong once our clients have lost 5 pounds or more of fat. So even if you track perfectly, if the calculator overshoots, the deficit becomes too harsh and hunger and cravings explode. If it undershoots, you're doing a ton of work and the scale doesn't move. Either way, the system breaks. Now, to be fair, this is more sustainable than rule-based diets, and it is simpler than macro tracking. So applicability is high, sustainability is medium, but long-term effectiveness is low because the numbers stop being right. This gives calorie calculators a total score of 6, putting them in the C tier. They work for a small group, usually early on, but fail most people over time. So if calculators stop working, how do you keep updating your targets? By measuring how your body actually responds. Here's what that looks like. One of my clients recently lost over a pound of fat in a week, eating 1,800 calories, even though the calculator told her to eat 1,500. Same person, same effort, different outcome, because the target finally matched her body. So how do you actually adjust? You only need to look at 2 things. First, fat loss, not weight loss. About 38% of our clients don't see the scale move much, but they keep losing body fat. Second, if you're losing more lean mass than fat, you may need to up the target. Now, there are 9 different patterns this can play out as. And instead of making you memorize all of them, my body fat tracker linked in the description below tells you exactly how to adjust your targets based on those 2 signals. This works across body types, ages, and conditions. It automatically accounts for your actual calorie burn from movement. And because it adapts to what your body needs, hunger and cravings dial way down, which shoots consistency way up. So calorie targets based on your body's data score high on effectiveness, applicability, and sustainability. Woohoo! Our first S tier. But if you're like I was in 2010, you'd be thinking, all this nutrition stuff sounds like a lot. I'll just work out more. So let's do the math. A hard hour-long workout burns about 300 calories, which you can undo by eating 2 small cookies. Effectiveness? Low. D tier. At this point, someone always says, okay, but what about HIIT? There is an afterburn effect even after I stop exercising. Surely that has to count for something. The afterburn is about 5 to 15% extra calories on top of the workout total, not per hour. So if your workout burned 300 calories, that's 15 to 45 calories extra, about a quarter of a cookie. As a fat loss strategy, it's ineffective. Also D tier. But what about fasted cardio? My body has to use more of my fat stores since my glycogen stores are depleted from not having eaten. Let's put numbers behind it. If you burn 300 calories working out, the extra burn will be about 10 to 20 calories, a sixth of a cookie. Why so small? While your body did burn more fat during the workout, later it often compensates, burning less fat or spiking your hunger, which makes you more prone to eat more, far more, than the sixth of a cookie you earned. Also ineffective, D tier. Now we come to the exercise that intermediate weight loss folks tend to focus on: strength training. Numbers to the front. A typical lifting session burns up to 300 calories. Again, 2 small cookies. Even if you gain a meaningful amount of muscle, say 5 pounds over many months, which is an excellent result, each pound burns about 6 to 10 calories per day at rest. That's 30 to 50 extra calories per day total, about a quarter of a cookie. So is strength training useless? Not quite. Here's where the body fat stage you're in comes into play. If you're in the unhealthy body fat range, yes, it's not an efficient fat loss lever. You can skip it for now unless you enjoy it. But as you enter the acceptable to good ranges, strength training becomes important to retain muscle as you get leaner and older. So effectiveness is high over the long term. Applicability is medium, as it depends which body fat stage you're in. And sustainability is medium depending on what you enjoy. Total score 7. B tier. Works for some, depends on your lifestyle factors. And if you're exercising for spot reduction, you can't tell your body where to lose fat from. This is not only ineffective, it's harmful because it takes you down a rabbit hole of listening to people who don't know what they're talking about. F tier. So is exercise largely not effective for fat loss? Formal workouts? Mostly yes, when used alone. Here's the metabolism pyramid of the average person. About 5% of your calorie burn comes from formal workouts. So if you maintain at 2,000 calories on average, the most you're burning from formal workouts is about 100 to 200 calories a day over a year. But notice the level right below it. Non-exercise activity, 10%. Neat is indeed very neat. You just pace around your house, keep shaking your legs, getting about 6,000 steps in a day. That can easily double the calories burned compared to formal workouts. And here's the invisible bonus. When you're walking, you're usually not snacking. Fewer hours parked on the couch, fewer mindless calories. Effectiveness for fat loss, medium. It won't get you to goal on its own. Applicability and sustainability, high. Total score, 8. A tier works for most people, but requires you to be a little intentional to get those steps in. So if I were you, I'd focus on just 2 methods, the ones in the S and A tier. Simple, but definitely not easy, as I'm sure you know from past attempts to hit a calorie target. Because here's the part nobody talks about. Tracking fails because you're doing it the wrong way. That's why the next layer is all about how. There are 2 parts to this: how to track without burning out, and how to actually meet your target even during busy weeks and with cravings. Let's start with the way most people track. Total commitment to 100% accuracy. It usually looks like this. You download an app, you buy a food scale, you weigh everything, raw, cooked, before, after. You log every bite, every lick, every splash of oil. And for the first week or 2, you're crushing it. But then real life shows up. You eat out, someone else cooks, you don't know if that sauce was butter or oil, you're guessing, and now you're stressed. And here's where things start to unravel. Because once accuracy slips from 100% to 90%, your brain goes, what's the point? But then, I can't track this meal becomes I can't track today, which quickly becomes I can't track this week. And then tracking doesn't work for me. But this isn't even the worst part. What nobody tells you is 100% accuracy isn't just hard, it's impossible. Nutrition labels are legally allowed to be off by up to 20%. That means a 500 calorie meal could actually be 400 or 600. And those 0-calorie foods, they're not zero. They're legally allowed to round down. You were set up to fail from the start. And worse, this approach puts people off the one S-tier method entirely. This is the second of 3 damaging mindsets, the all or nothing, perfection or quit trap we have to coach people out of. That's why it doesn't just rank low, it's actively harmful, landing in the F tier. So then, how do you track? By leaning into 2 simple facts. Fact 1, nutrition labels are inaccurate. So we stop chasing accuracy and start chasing consistency. That means if I eat yogurt and fruit every morning, I log the same calories every time, even if the number isn't perfect. If I eat out, I stick to a regular rotation of restaurants and meals, and I log the same numbers for the same foods. Are they exact? No, but they are consistent, and consistency is what removes the noise. Fact 2, your calorie number only matters if it causes fat loss. The number itself is meaningless. Think of it like the TV volume. You might like the TV at 15, your friend might like it at 22. Who cares? The only thing that matters is whether you can hear the TV. Calories work the same way. If 1500 calories causes fat loss for you, that's your volume setting. Is your actual intake exactly 1500? Probably not. Labels are inaccurate, but it doesn't matter. What matters is that this number produces the result. So if fat loss slows, you turn the volume down. If you're losing too fast or burning out, you turn it up. Because the data is consistent, the signal is clean, and that means you can take action with confidence. And here's the game-changing benefit most people miss. When the number stops meaning how little I can eat and starts meaning what works for my body, you stop obsessing over pushing it lower just so you can eat more later. You detach from the number and reattach to your body's feedback. And this is how you retrain yourself to listen to your body's cues and move toward the final destination, intuitive eating. That's why this approach is high effectiveness, high applicability, and it is sustainable for most people, even if it still requires more intention than intuitive eating, which puts it solidly in the A tier. It works long-term for most people if you're willing to be intentional. But what about weekends that easily blow your target? The most popular advice is just have a cheat day once a week and make up for it with a bigger deficit the other 6 days. Sounds reasonable on paper, but if you're anything like me, here's what actually happens. You get to that cheat day starving, and you go rabid. And then the idea of snapping back to undereating the next day feels terrifying. So you delay it by 1 day, then 2. And week over week, the off days expand until you're completely off plan. This isn't a willpower problem. It's a signal problem. When you put your body through big ups and downs, you give it mixed signals. So when you finally eat, hunger goes berserk. When you restrict again, metabolism floors. To you, it feels like your body is fighting you. In reality, it's like a confused but well-meaning puppy trying to help with no idea what you actually want. And there's another cost most people miss. Cheat days destroy consistency of your data. You can't tell cause and effect anymore, so you can't know if your target is working or not. And even worse, cheat days actively train an all or nothing mindset, one of the most damaging patterns we have to coach people out of, which puts cheat days squarely in the F tier. So then how do you handle weekend eating out? By using a simple fact most people forget. Your body doesn't reset to 0 every morning. It runs on a rolling average. That means no single day matters as much as your weekly intake. So instead of cheat days, you plan for different calorie targets. Lower targets on non-weekend days, higher targets on weekend days. You can get this for your body using the calorie calculator linked in the description below. But wait, how is this different than cheat days? Because you must still hit only a 15% weekly deficit. The gap between your low and high days isn't as crazy, so you don't trigger hunger spikes and metabolism dips. This makes it easier to stick to your plan. And because you're still tracking, you preserve the consistency of your data. You can tell cause and effect, and therefore whether your target is working or not. Now, this isn't for everyone. If you rarely eat out or your schedule is predictable, this can be overkill. That's why calorie cycling scores medium on applicability, high on effectiveness, and medium on sustainability. Total score of 7, which puts it in the B tier. Works for some people depending on lifestyle. But here's the thing, while the rhythm of a week varies by lifestyle, the rhythm of metabolism is inescapable for everyone. Think back to when you've successfully stuck to your weight loss plan for 3 to 4 solid months. One of 2 things happens. Either your fat loss stalls, bouncing between the same 5 pounds over a month, remember from earlier? Every method lands here. Or you're still losing fat, but burning out. And if you're like I was, your instinct, just push harder. Bad idea. Those aren't failure signals, they're timing signals. This is your body telling you you're entering the recovery phase of your cycle. The phase where pushing less actually gets you further. This is when you temporarily step out of a deficit and return to maintenance calories for at least 2 weeks, sometimes longer. This lets hunger settle, metabolism bounce back, motivation rebuild. You don't return to a deficit until you feel excited to get back to it. Deficit breaks score high effectiveness, high applicability, and high sustainability, giving it a total score of 9, which puts it in the S tier. So up to this point, the pattern is clear. Consistency tracking, deficit breaks, and optional calorie cycling if weekends are big days. But even with reasonable targets, people fail. You can still blow past targets when cravings and busy weeks hit. And when that happens the first time, almost everyone has the same instinct. I can't be trusted to decide. I need someone to tell me exactly what to eat. They swing to prescriptive meal plans like G-Plan, Jenny Craig, and others. And on paper, that makes total sense. You get structure, you get hundreds of meals, you can swap ingredients and pick calorie ranges. It feels flexible. It feels safe. But in real life, it's like trying to live like a hermit in the middle of downtown. You still gotta deal with sweets in the checkout aisle, social eating on weekends, holidays with family, cravings triggered by stress from society. So either people ditch the plan midway, or they reach their goal weight only to regain once they try to integrate back into society. And worse, this reinforces a damaging all or nothing mindset. I can only succeed when my life is perfectly controlled, which is impossible. So prescriptive meal plans aren't just ineffective long-term, they're actively harmful. F tier. So then how do you not blow past targets? First, we need to acknowledge why we blow past targets. There are only 3 reasons: hunger, cravings, and convenience. There are literally hundreds of tips out there on how to tackle these, and we don't have all day. So I'm just going to distill this down to the 3 most powerful methods, all S tier, that for 20% of effort give you 80% of results. The first is to add on top of calorie tracking the only macro I mentioned earlier that matters: protein. But not at bodybuilder levels. From our client data, just 18% of our calories from protein is enough. But how do you put that into daily practice? Just pick one 20-gram protein that's less than 150 calories and have it 4 times a day, once with each meal and once as a late afternoon snack. I've linked our lean protein cheat sheet in the description below. This dramatically reduces hunger and cravings, and once you have a rotation of 2 to 4 go-to options, it's extremely convenient. The second S tier method takes advantage of another fact I shared earlier. Our bodies love predictability. You do this by eating every 3.5 to 4 hours. And if you find yourself hungry before then it's your feedback from your body that your previous meal wasn't protein heavy enough. But what if you want to eat before 4 hours, not because you're hungry, but because cravings hit? The most powerful lever here lowers cravings by 30 to 40%, lowers hunger by 20 to 30%, and increases calorie burn by 5 to 10%. It's high quality sleep, 8 to 9 hours with minimal awakenings. Definite S tier. At this point, even with a solid starting plan, you won't be able to stick to it forever until it's refined to fit you uniquely. Because here's what usually happens. You start strong. You're tracking consistently, you're taking deficit breaks, you are having protein, you're eating every few hours, you're sleeping well, you're doing your daily movements, and for a while, it works. But then real life starts poking holes in the system. Maybe for you, afternoons are the problem. You do great all day. And then 4 p.m. hits. Meetings run long, you skip a snack, dinner gets pushed back, and suddenly you're ravenous and blowing past your target at night, even though you followed the plan. Or maybe the issue is social. You're fine Monday to Thursday, but the moment you eat with other people, something flips. You don't want to be that person. You don't want to track. You don't want to explain yourself. So you go off plan, not because you're hungry, but because you want to feel normal. Or maybe sleep is your landmine. When you're rested, everything feels easy. When you're not, the same plan suddenly feels impossible. You're not weaker, your brain is just running a different operating system that day. None of these mean that the plan is wrong. They mean the plan hasn't been shaped around your patterns yet. There are 2 very popular pieces of advice on how to tackle this. The first is no pain, no gain. Just push harder. This kind of tough love can feel motivating at first. but it's wishful thinking, like trying to fly a plane despite gravity. Trying to muscle through long meetings, social pressure, or revenge bedtime procrastination with sheer willpower is exactly this, trying to push a plane off the ground. And when that fails, you don't ask, what do I need to tweak? You think, I am lazy. I lack discipline. That's the real damage. This approach turns normal friction into a character flaw, which is why no pain, no gain is so harmful. F tier. The second popular advice people swing to after no pain, no gain is the let's get an accountability buddy stick, or carrot. If someone checks in on me, I'll do it. On paper, this sounds perfect. Actually, that's what Coach Viva's first 2 years were, being a 12-hour a day, 7 days a week accountability buddy and coach. We learned 2 hard lessons. First, people started strong, then life got hard. They couldn't follow through, felt embarrassed, and ghosted us. And the ones who did reach their goals regained everything once we stopped checking in. There was no internal skill that was built, just short-term compliance. Later, we found out psychology has a name for the first pattern: avoidance coping. When something triggers shame, guilt, or anxiety, people avoid the situation entirely to escape the feeling, even if avoidance makes the outcome worse. And weight loss is a perfect trap for this. People already feel like they should be able to do it on their own. So needing accountability feels embarrassing. Failing under accountability feels worse, which quietly reinforces the most damaging belief of all: I'm the problem. That's why external accountability by itself doesn't just fail, it's harmful. F tier. So what actually works? To answer that, we need to ask a different question. How do you personalize anything? Think about how a wedding dress is custom fit. First, measurements are taken. Then the dress is stitched. Then you try it on. Maybe the waist needs adjusting, maybe the hem is a little long, but no tailor changes 5 things at once because you'd ruin the dress. Instead, you run a simple loop. Measure, change, test, repeat. That is exactly how sustainable weight loss works. When you run the S and A tier methods for a week, you measure. Then one and only one of 3 things usually shows up: a habit issue, like long meetings breaking your eating rhythm; a psychological issue, like not wanting to be that person socially; an outcome issue, like a fat loss stall despite hitting targets. You do not work on all 3, you pick one. If it's a habit issue, your measurement step expands to breaking down the habit loop: trigger, craving, action, reward. And you make one small change to cut the loop earlier next week. If it's psychological, your measurement step expands to capturing the exact inner dialogue before, during, and after the moment. Then you change one story you're telling yourself that week. If it's an outcome issue, then you tweak your targets or take a deficit week instead of jumping to a new plan where you'll inevitably hit the same outcome, habit, and psychological walls again. The way to succeed is through, not back to square one. The game-changing benefit of this approach is while every other method tries to change everything about you at once, this approach meets you exactly where you're at, one loop at a time. That's why it's highly effective, highly applicable, and highly sustainable. S tier for sure. But how do you do this measure change test for your situation? You have 2 options. One, this is exactly what we specialize in. So if you want my help shortcutting through all the trial and error and building systems tailored to your patterns, then learn more about my weight loss program in the description and comments below. Or if you want to DIY it, then you don't want to miss the next video where I give you the full blueprint of our weight loss program, A to Z. It took my co-coach Lucia and I 10 years and $45,000 combined to figure this out. So you don't want to miss the step-by-step breakdown here. And always remember, you can do it.